London, 1845. The rain beat a relentless tattoo against the windows of No. 7, Grosvenor Square, matching the desperate rhythm of Ophelia Osborne's heart. She stood motionless before the dying fire, her uncle's letter crumpled in her trembling hands. The final line blurred before her tear-filled eyes, and so, my dear niece, your father's debts leave us no choice. Your marriage to the Duke of Islington must proceed with haste. The Duke of Islington. Even his title sent shivers down Ophelia's spine. Oliver Islington, London's most notorious bachelor, whose cold demeanour and cutting remarks had reduced débutantes to tears across 3 seasons. A man said to have a heart of stone, if he possessed one at all. Her cousins had whispered the rumours, how his fiancée had fled to the continent rather than marry him, how servants left his employ within weeks, how he had fought 3 duels and won them all without remorse. He was called the Frost Duke in society circles, his blue eyes as cold as winter and his manner just as biting. And now she, a mere gentleman's daughter, and a penniless one at that, was to be his bride. Miss Ophelia? Mrs. Winters, her aunt's housekeeper, appeared at the door. Your aunt requests your presence in the drawing-room. The Duke has arrived. Ophelia smoothed the letter, tucking it into her pocket. So soon? I thought we were to meet tomorrow. His Grace insisted on an immediate audience. Mrs. Winter's sympathetic expression spoke volumes. Perhaps it won't be as terrible as you fear. But as Ophelia followed the housekeeper down the corridor, she knew better. This arrangement was not a love match but a business transaction, her father's gambling debts exchanged for her hand, her youth, and whatever remained of her now tarnished respectability. The double doors to the drawing-room loomed before her. Taking a steadying breath, Ophelia straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and entered to meet her fate. The Duke stood with his back to the door, a tall figure silhouetted against the window. At her entrance, he turned slowly, revealing a face more severe than handsome, all sharp angles and stern lines. His dark hair was immaculately styled, his cravat pristine, his frock coat of the finest cut. Everything about him spoke of wealth, power, and cold control. Your Grace, her aunt simpered from her seat by the fire. May I present my niece, Miss Ophelia Osborne? Ophelia sank into a curtsy, keeping her eyes lowered. Your Grace. Miss Osborne. His voice was deep, like distant thunder. Rise. When she straightened, she found his piercing blue eyes examining her with clinical detachment, as if appraising horseflesh at Tattersall's. A flush of indignation crept up her neck. I understand congratulations are in order, he said, the words like ice. It seems we are to be married. So I have been informed, Your Grace. Ophelia met his gaze steadily, despite her racing heart. Though I confess the arrangement came as a surprise. A muscle twitched in his jaw. I imagine it did. As it did to me when your father's solicitor approached mine with this proposition. Oliver, her aunt interrupted, her voice strained with forced cheer. Please, do sit down. Tea will be served momentarily. I have no time for tea, Mrs. Osborne. The Duke's tone brooked no argument. I came only to confirm that Miss Osborne understands the terms of our arrangement. Terms? Ophelia echoed, a knot forming in her stomach. Yes. His gaze remained cold. In exchange for settling your father's considerable debts, which, I might add, include substantial sums owed to me personally from his final, disastrous night at my club, you will become the Duchess of Islington. You will manage my households, provide me with an heir, and conduct yourself with the dignity befitting your station. He paused. You will not embarrass me. The brutality of his assessment stole Ophelia's breath. Her father's gambling had brought her low indeed, but to be spoken to as if she were a servant being hired rather than a bride being wooed. And what, Your Grace, she said softly, though her voice did not waver, do I receive in this exchange, beyond the honor of your illustrious name? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, that she dared question him. Financial security. Social position. Protection. He listed these benefits as if reciting items from a ledger. Surely these are adequate compensation for a young woman in your precarious circumstances. Her aunt gasped at Ophelia's impertinence, but the Duke raised a hand to silence her. The banns will be read starting this Sunday, he continued. We will be married in 4 weeks' time at St. George's. My solicitor will call tomorrow with the settlement papers. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small velvet box, which he placed on the table between them. Your ring. I trust it will suffice. Without opening it, Ophelia nodded. You are most generous, Your Grace. I am practical, Miss Osborne. Nothing more. He turned to leave, then paused. I dine at home tomorrow evening. You will join me at 8. My carriage will collect you. It was not a request. After he departed, Ophelia's aunt rushed to the box, opening it to reveal a massive diamond surrounded by sapphires. Oh, my dear! Such a fortune! You must be the luckiest girl in London. But Ophelia, staring at the glittering stones, felt only the weight of gilded chains. The Duke's townhouse on Berkeley Square loomed like a fortress, its windows gleaming with lamplight as Ophelia ascended the steps the following evening. A butler with a face as impassive as his master's showed her into a drawing-room of imposing grandeur, all dark wood, rich crimson and gold accents. Portraits of stern-faced Islingtons gazed down at her, as if already judging her unworthy. Miss Osborne. The Duke entered, still in his riding clothes. You're punctual. A promising start. Ophelia curtsied. Your Grace. You may call me Islington in private. He rang for a servant. Brandy, he ordered when the footman appeared, then glanced at Ophelia. And whatever ladies prefer these days. Just tea, thank you, she said to the footman. When they were alone again, an uncomfortable silence descended. The Duke studied her with that same assessing gaze, while Ophelia struggled to maintain her composure under such scrutiny. You are not what I expected, he said finally. Oh? And what did you expect, your Islington? Someone more like your father. Indulgent. Frivolous. His eyes narrowed. Someone who would throw themselves at the chance to become a duchess. Ophelia's hands tightened in her lap. I am grateful for your intervention in my family's affairs, but I assure you, I never aspired to marry above my station, especially not through such circumstances. Yet here we are. He accepted his brandy from the returning servant, downing it in one swallow. Tell me, did you know of your father's debts? Not until after his death. The admission pained her. He kept many secrets. And you? Do you keep secrets, Miss Osborne? None that would interest a duke. She sipped her tea, finding strength in the familiar ritual. I read extensively. I speak French and Italian. I play the pianoforte tolerably well. I was educated at Mrs. Harrington's Seminary for Young Ladies until my father could no longer afford the fees. And after that, I taught myself from books in my father's library. She met his gaze directly. The ones he hadn't yet sold. Something close to approval flickered in his expression. You're well-spoken for someone with such interrupted education. And you're remarkably direct for an aristocrat, she countered. I was given to understand that your class prefers to speak in circles and innuendos. To her astonishment, one corner of his mouth twitched upward, not quite a smile, but perhaps its distant relation. I have no patience for society's games, Miss Osborne. I say what I mean. Then say this plainly, why did you agree to this marriage? Surely a man of your standing could have found a more suitable bride, one with a dowry rather than debts. The almost smile vanished. Dinner will be served shortly, he said, rising abruptly. This way. Throughout the meal, a lavish affair served in a dining room that could have seated 30, Ophelia attempted to penetrate the Duke's armor. She inquired about his estates, his political interests, his horses, which, she had learned from her uncle, were his primary passion. Each question received terse, minimal responses. You're interrogating me, Miss Osborne, he said finally, setting down his fork. I find it tiresome. I'm attempting conversation, Your Grace, she replied evenly. As we are to spend our lives together, I thought some mutual understanding might be beneficial. Understanding? He laughed, a short, harsh sound. What is there to understand? You need financial rescue, I need a wife who won't embarrass me and can provide an heir. The arrangement is perfectly straightforward. His callousness stung, but Ophelia refused to show it. And love? Affection? Companionship? Are these not considerations in a marriage? Love is a pretty fiction invented by poets to sell books. He refilled his wine glass. My parents' marriage was arranged, as was their parents before them. The Islington line continues, the estates prosper, and that is what matters. Were they happy? She asked quietly. They were dutiful. The Duke's expression hardened. As we shall be. After dinner, rather than inviting her to withdraw while he took his port, the Duke escorted Ophelia to a music room containing a magnificent pianoforte. You claim to play, he said. Demonstrate. It wasn't a request she could refuse. Seating herself at the instrument, Ophelia began a simple Mozart sonata, one she knew well enough to play while distracted by the imposing figure watching her. Her technique was imperfect, it had been months since she'd had access to an instrument, but her expression and feeling compensated for technical flaws. She was startled when, midway through, the Duke moved to stand beside her. Your left hand is weak in the arpeggios, he observed. Here. Without warning, he sat beside her on the bench, their shoulders nearly touching. Taking her left hand, he positioned her fingers on the keys. Try again. From the Allegretto. His proximity was unsettling, the clean scent of his shaving soap, the warmth radiating from his body, the unexpected gentleness of his touch as he guided her fingers. Ophelia stumbled through the passage, acutely aware of him. Better, he said, releasing her hand. Though you require practice. I haven't had access to a pianoforte since my father's illness began, she admitted. Ours was sold to pay the doctor. Something shifted in the Duke's expression, not quite sympathy, but perhaps a recognition of her loss. You may use this one. Daily, if you wish. Music should be maintained, like any worthwhile skill. It was the closest thing to kindness he had shown her. Thank you, Islington. He nodded curtly and rose. It grows late. My carriage will return you to your aunt's. As they walked to the entrance hall, Ophelia gathered her courage. May I ask one question before I leave? He raised an eyebrow, waiting. Are you always this cold, she asked, or is it a special effort you make for my benefit? His expression darkened. Mind your tongue, Miss Osborne. I may have agreed to make you my Duchess, but I can just as easily make you miserable. I believe you are already succeeding admirably at that, Your Grace, she replied, cursing her impulsivity even as the words left her mouth. To her surprise, instead of anger, something like respect flickered in his eyes. Good night, Miss Osborne. I shall call on you tomorrow at 3. As the carriage pulled away, Ophelia leaned back against the plush seat, her mind whirling. Beneath the Duke's icy exterior, she had glimpsed something else, something wounded, perhaps even vulnerable. It was like seeing movement beneath a frozen pond. You couldn't be certain what lurked there, but you knew the ice wasn't as solid as it appeared. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparations. The Duke called daily, escorting Ophelia to modistes for her trousseau, to jewelers to select pieces from the Islington collection that required resetting, and to social engagements where she was introduced as his fiancée to a society that received her with thinly veiled curiosity and, in some cases, outright hostility. They wonder what spell you've cast, the Duke observed during a carriage ride after a particularly trying tea at Lady Harrington's, where the hostess had all but accused Ophelia of entrapping him. London cannot fathom why the Frost Duke would choose an unknown gentleman's daughter with no fortune or connections. And you allow them to wonder? Ophelia asked, watching his profile. Their speculation amuses me. It humiliates me, she countered quietly. His gaze snapped to hers. You are to be a duchess. their opinions are irrelevant. Perhaps to you. But I must live among these people, build a life here. She twisted the massive engagement ring on her finger. Unless you intend to keep me isolated at your country estate once the wedding is over. The Duke's expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. Is that what you fear? Isolation? I fear many things about our future, Islington. Ophelia met his gaze steadily. Your coldness. Your contempt. A lifetime of duty without affection. For a long moment, he said nothing, his jaw working as if he were physically restraining words. Finally, he sighed, a sound so human it startled her. I am not. He paused, seeming to struggle. I am not adept at displaying warmth, Miss Osborne. It was not encouraged in my upbringing. It was the closest he had come to a personal revelation. Ophelia seized the opening. Tell me about your upbringing. To her surprise, he did. Haltingly at first, then with increasing fluidity, he described a childhood of rigid discipline under a father who believed affection created weakness and a mother too cowed to contradict him. He spoke of Eton and Oxford, where his title ensured deference but few true friendships. And he alluded, without specifics, to a disappointment in his youth that had confirmed his father's teachings about the dangers of emotional attachment. So you see, he concluded as the carriage approached her aunt's home, coldness is not an effort I make. It is simply what remains when everything else has been trained out of you. Ophelia, moved by this glimpse behind his walls, reached across the carriage to touch his hand. It needn't remain so, Islington. People can change. He stiffened at her touch but did not withdraw. At my age? I think not. You're hardly ancient at 32, she said with a small smile. And I am only 22. We have time to learn different ways of being together. He studied her face, his expression unreadable. You are an unusual woman, Ophelia Osborne. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected thrill through her. Perhaps, she said softly, that is why fate has matched us, Oliver Islington. After that day, something shifted between them. The Duke remained reserved, but moments of connection began to punctuate their interactions, a shared observation about an overwrought society matron, his hand steadying her elbow as they climbed stairs, a rare smile when she mastered a difficult passage on the pianoforte during her daily practice at his home. A week before the wedding, disaster struck. Ophelia arrived at Berkeley Square for tea with the Duke's sister, Lady Caroline Trentham, only to find the house in an uproar. It's dreadful, Lady Caroline exclaimed, pulling Ophelia into the library and closing the door. Simply dreadful. Have you seen today's Gazette? No, look. She thrust the paper at Ophelia, pointing to a column titled Society Whispers. Ophelia's blood ran cold as she read, this correspondent wonders what the esteemed D.I. would say if he knew his bride-to-be has a history with the notorious Captain S., lately returned from the peninsula. Sources close to the captain suggest the lady's virtue may not be as intact as her noble fiancé believes. One must question if the hasty nature of this unlikely match might soon be explained by a conveniently early arrival in the nursery. This is a lie, Ophelia whispered, her hands shaking. An absolute falsehood. I've never met any Captain S. I don't even know who they mean. Captain Simon, Lady Caroline supplied grimly. Roland Simon. He's a scoundrel of the first order, but his family is well connected. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that he knew you, intimately, before he left for Spain 2 years ago. Horror washed over Ophelia. But why? Why would he say such things? Who knows? Spite? Amusement? Or perhaps? Lady Caroline hesitated. Perhaps what? Perhaps someone paid him to discredit you. She lowered her voice. Oliver has many enemies, and more than a few disappointed mammas whose daughters he rejected. This scandal could force him to cry off, leaving him humiliated and you ruined. Ophelia sank into a chair, her legs no longer able to support her. Where is he? Your brother? Gone to find Simon. Lady Caroline's expression was grim. When he read this, I've never seen him so angry. He took his pistols. Pistols? No. Ophelia stood abruptly. He can't fight a duel over this. Even if he wins, he could be arrested. If he loses, she couldn't complete the thought. He won't be reasoned with. Not in this mood. Lady Caroline paced the room. But perhaps you could try. He's gone to White's. Simon haunts the card room there most afternoons. Without hesitation, Ophelia rushed to the door. I'll take the Duke's carriage. This must be stopped before it goes any further. Ophelia! Lady Caroline caught her arm. If you appear at White's, a gentleman's club, the scandal will only worsen. I don't care, Ophelia replied fiercely. I won't let him risk his life over a lie. The journey to St. James's Street passed in a blur of anxiety. As the carriage pulled up to the exclusive club, Ophelia spotted the Duke on the steps, confronting a sandy-haired man in a captain's uniform. Even from a distance, she could see Oliver's rigid posture and clenched fists. Without waiting for the footman, she flung open the carriage door and hurried toward them, heedless of the shocked expressions of gentlemen entering the club. Islington, she called. Stop this at once. Both men turned, the captain with amusement, the Duke with thunderous anger. Get back in the carriage, Ophelia, Oliver commanded, his voice deadly quiet. This does not concern you. It concerns me entirely. She reached them, breathless. You cannot duel over a lie. Captain Simon swept an exaggerated bow. Miss Osborne. How charming to see you again. Though I must say, you were more welcoming the last time we met. We have never met, sir, she replied coldly. And you know it. No? He feigned confusion. Perhaps it was the candlelight that confused me. Or the wine. You did drink rather a lot that evening at Lord Westmoreland's hunting lodge. Oliver's hand moved to his coat, where his pistol surely waited. One more word, Simon, and we'll settle this here rather than at dawn. Wait! Ophelia stepped between them, facing the captain. Lord Westmoreland's hunting lodge, you say? When exactly did this alleged encounter occur? December of 43, Simon replied smoothly. The night of the winter solstice. You wore a green gown that complemented your eyes most enchantingly. Ophelia's relief was immediate and overwhelming. How interesting! Especially as I spent the entirety of December 1843 at my aunt's home in Bath, nursing my cousin through scarlet fever. She turned to Oliver. Lady Harrington was there as well, visiting her sister. She can confirm my presence. As can the local doctor who attended daily. Doubt flickered across Simon's face. Perhaps it was 42, then. In 42, I was at school, Ophelia countered. Mrs. Harrington's seminary, where no male visitors were permitted and students were chaperoned on all excursions. She stepped closer to him, anger replacing fear. Who paid you to tell these lies, Captain? Was it Lady Northcote, whose daughter you've been courting? Or perhaps Lord Pembroke, who lost £20,000 to the Duke last season? Simon's confident facade cracked. I don't know what you're implying. She implies, Oliver interrupted, his voice like steel, that you are a paid liar as well as a coward. And unless you wish to find yourself called out by every gentleman in London, you will retract your story immediately, in writing, and leave England for an extended tour of the continent. The captain blanched. Now see here, Islington, my solicitor will draw up the statement. You will sign it. The Times will publish it tomorrow. Oliver's hand returned to his coat. Or we can proceed with our original appointment at dawn. The choice is yours. Faced with exposure or potential death, Simon capitulated. Very well. A retraction. But this isn't over, Islington. On the contrary, the Duke replied coldly. It is entirely over. For if you ever speak my fiancé's name again, in public or private, I will destroy you so thoroughly that even your creditors won't be able to find you." He turned to Ophelia, offering his arm. "Come. We're leaving." In the carriage, Ophelia expected the Duke's anger to turn on her for her public intervention. Instead, he sat beside her, took her hands in his, and studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You believe me, then?" she asked softly. "About the captain's lies?" "I believed you before you arrived," he replied. "Why do you think I was at White's?" "To challenge him. To defend my honor. To defend what I already knew to be true." His grip tightened on her hands. "I may be cold, Ophelia, but I am not a fool. I've watched you these past weeks. I know your character. And I know Simon for the desperate fortune hunter he is." Tears welled in her eyes at his faith in her. "Thank you." "No," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you for believing I was worth racing across London to save, even at the risk of your reputation." The air between them seemed to change, charged with something new and fragile. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw, Oliver raised one hand to her cheek. When she didn't pull away, he leaned forward and, with exquisite gentleness, pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was brief, almost reverential, but it sent warmth cascading through Ophelia's body. When he drew back, she saw vulnerability in his eyes that he had never before revealed. "I begin to think," he said softly, "that this arrangement may prove more rewarding than either of us anticipated." The scandal in the Gazette was eclipsed the next day by Captain Simon's full retraction and the announcement of his immediate departure for Italy. But the damage had already been done in one crucial respect: the timeline for the wedding had to be accelerated to prevent further gossip. "Tomorrow," the Duke declared when he arrived at Ophelia's aunt's home that afternoon. "We will marry tomorrow at St. George's, with a special license. Only family and the closest friends." Her aunt nearly swooned at the impropriety, but Ophelia understood the necessity. "Very well. Though my wedding gown won't be ready for another 5 days." "Wear whatever you have that's suitable," Oliver replied. "I care only that you become my Duchess with all possible haste." And so, on a bright spring morning, Ophelia Osborne entered St. George's, Hanover Square, in a pale blue silk gown, the nicest she owned, to marry a man who had begun as her jailer and somehow, improbably, become her champion. The ceremony was brief, the congregation small but distinguished. Lady Caroline squeezed Ophelia's hand as she took her place beside the Duke, whispering, "Welcome to the family, sister." When the clergyman asked who gave this woman to be married, Ophelia's uncle stepped forward with uncharacteristic dignity. And when the time came to speak her vows, she found her voice clear and unwavering. "I, Ophelia, take thee, Oliver." The Duke's hands were steady around hers as he slid the simple gold band onto her finger to join the ostentatious engagement ring. But when he spoke his vows, she detected the faintest tremor in his voice, a vulnerability that moved her more than any grand gesture could have. Afterward, a small wedding breakfast was held at Berkeley Square. The guests were cordial if curious, clearly wondering at the hasty ceremony and unlikely match. As they raised glasses to toast the new Duchess of Islington, Ophelia caught snippets of whispered speculation. "Heard he fought a duel for her honor. Perhaps there's more to the girl than we thought. Never seen Islington look at anyone the way he looks at her." By late afternoon, the guests had departed, leaving the newlyweds alone in the grand house that was now Ophelia's home. An awkward silence fell between them as reality set in. They were husband and wife, bound together for life after a courtship measured in weeks rather than years. "Would you like to rest before dinner?" Oliver asked, formal once more now that they were alone. "Your rooms have been prepared." "My rooms?" Ophelia echoed, a flicker of disappointment in her chest. "Not ours." Color rose in the Duke's cheeks, the first time she had seen him truly discomfited. "I thought, that is, I assumed you might prefer your own space. At least initially." He cleared his throat. "The Duchess's suite connects to mine through a private sitting room. The arrangement is traditional." Ophelia summoned her courage. "And if I wish to break with tradition?" His eyes darkened. "Then I would accommodate your wishes, Duchess." In all things. The title sounded different now, not a cold formality but an intimacy, a shared secret between them. Show me, she said softly. Show me our home, husband. He offered his arm, and together they climbed the grand staircase. Oliver guided her through the house, introducing her to rooms that would now fall under her domain, the morning room with its eastern light, the conservatory filled with exotic plants, the library with its thousands of volumes. You may change anything you wish, he told her as they paused in a drawing room decorated in a heavy, outdated style. This house has lacked a woman's touch since my mother's death 10 years ago. I wouldn't want to erase her presence, Ophelia said carefully. Perhaps you could tell me what she loved, what she valued, so I might honor that while making this home ours. Something softened in Oliver's expression. She loved music. The pianoforte in the music room was hers. And she adored fresh flowers, every room had them, even in winter. Ophelia smiled, storing this information away. Then we shall have music and flowers always. As the tour continued, the initial awkwardness between them eased. By the time they reached the family wing, a comfortable silence had replaced the tension. These are your rooms, Oliver said, opening a door to reveal a suite decorated in soft blues and creams. I had them refurbished when our engagement was announced. I hope they please you. Ophelia stepped inside, touched by the thoughtfulness evident in the details, the writing desk positioned to catch the best light, the shades by the fireplace perfect for reading, the vases of fresh spring flowers on every surface. They're beautiful, she said sincerely. Thank you. He nodded, lingering in the doorway as if uncertain whether to enter or withdraw. Through that door is the sitting room that connects to my chambers. You may, that is, you are always welcome to knock. Or not. Understanding his meaning, Ophelia felt heat rise to her cheeks. And you? Are you always welcome to knock as well? If you wish it. His voice had dropped lower, sending a pleasant shiver down her spine. I do wish it, she said simply. We are husband and wife, Oliver. I would not have us live as strangers. He stepped closer then, his eyes never leaving hers. I have not been kind to you, Ophelia. When this arrangement began, I treated you as a necessity rather than a person. I was cold, demanding, dismissive. He took her hands in his. Yet you have shown me nothing but dignity, intelligence, and courage. You defended me to society. You raced across London to prevent me from risking my life. You stood beside me today and promised to share my future, despite my many failings. You defended me as well, she reminded him gently. You believed in me when others would have doubted. Because I have come to know you, he said, raising one hand to cup her cheek. And in knowing you, I find myself changed. Less cold. More hopeful. Ophelia leaned into his touch, her heart racing. Is this a declaration, Your Grace? A smile, a real one, transforming his severe features into something almost boyish, curved his lips. It is a beginning, Duchess. One I hope you will allow me to explore further. I should like that very much, she whispered as he bent to kiss her, this time with a passion that left no doubt about his feelings. Later, as they lay together in the Duke's, now there, massive bed, Ophelia traced idle patterns on her husband's chest. What changed your mind about me? When did I cease to be an obligation and become more? Oliver considered this, his fingers playing with her loosened hair. There was no single moment. It was a gradual awakening. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Perhaps it began the night you asked if I was always cold, or only for your benefit. No one had ever dared speak to me so directly before. It was refreshing. You might have dismissed me for impertinence. I considered it, he admitted with a chuckle. But then you would have missed the privilege of becoming the Frost Duke's wife. A great loss indeed, she teased. Though I begin to think the name no longer suits you. His expression grew serious. What would you call me instead? Ophelia studied him, this complicated man who had begun as her adversary and become her protector, her partner, perhaps someday her love. Mine, she said simply. I would call you mine. 6 months later, the Duke and Duchess of Islington stood receiving guests in their home, now transformed into a warm, welcoming space that reflected both his dignity and her more approachable nature. The occasion was a musical evening, the first of what Ophelia hoped would become a regular salon bringing together artists, intellectuals, and the more progressive elements of society. "You've worked miracles," Lady Caroline whispered, watching the diverse crowd mingling comfortably. "Not just with the house, but with my brother. I've never seen him so animated, so happy." Ophelia followed her gaze to where Oliver stood conversing with a promising young composer, his expression engaged, his posture relaxed. Occasionally, his eye sought hers across the room, a private smile passing between them when their gazes met. "It was never a miracle," Ophelia replied. "Merely patience. And perhaps a willingness to see the man beneath the title. Well, whatever you call it, London society is enchanted. You've become quite the sensation, the gentle maid who melted the Frost Duke's heart." Ophelia laughed. "Hardly a maid any longer," she said, one hand drifting unconsciously to her abdomen, where the first signs of their child had begun to make themselves known. Lady Caroline caught the gesture and gasped. "Ophelia, are you with child? Does Oliver know?" "I told him this morning." Ophelia's smile softened at the memory of her husband's reaction, his stunned silence followed by a joy so profound it had brought tears to both their eyes. There are no words for his happiness." Later that evening, after the guests had departed, Oliver found her in the music room, seated at her mother-in-law's pianoforte. Without speaking, he sat beside her on the bench, as he had that first night so many months ago. But now, instead of clinical instruction, he wrapped his arm around her waist, drawing her against his side. "A successful evening," he observed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You've charmed all of London, my love." "Not all," she corrected. "Lady Northcote still looks at me as if I've stolen the crown jewels." "You've stolen something far more valuable," according to her. His hand covered hers where it rested on the keys. "You've stolen the heart of a duke she had marked for her daughter." "Stolen?" Ophelia turned to face him, her expression mischievous. "I prefer to think I earned it through superior strategy and perseverance." Oliver laughed, the sound still novel enough to delight her. "Is that what you call it? I thought it was simply that you saw a man where others saw only a title and a fortune." "I saw a challenge," she corrected, leaning in to kiss him softly. "A mystery I was determined to solve." "And now that you have? Are you satisfied with your discovery?" Ophelia considered this, taking in the face that had become so dear to her, no longer cold and forbidding but warm, beloved, and increasingly expressive as he learned to shed the constraints of his upbringing. "I discover something new each day," she said honestly. "That's the beauty of it. Of us." He drew her closer, his hand moving to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. "When I agreed to this marriage, I thought I was accepting a duty. I never imagined I was embracing a gift. And now London whispers about the Duke who fought a duel for love rather than the Duke who froze out society," she murmured against his lips. "How the mighty have fallen." "Risen," he corrected. "How the mighty have risen." He kissed her deeply, then pulled back just enough to whisper, "And I would fight 100 duels, face 1,000 scandals, and brave all of society's judgment again, if it meant finding my way to you." In the quiet of their home, with the promise of their future growing between them, Ophelia knew that the whispers of London society no longer mattered. What mattered was this, the gentle understanding between a woman who had faced ruin with dignity and a man who had found, against all expectations, that a cold heart could indeed learn to trust, and through trust, to love.